Hey everybody, welcome back to Making Argument Meaningful. Dr. Steve Yano. This is lecture 3 in the series. In this lecture, we're going to talk about building arguments, or the structure of arguments. It's also kind of analyzing arguments. Basically, I want to teach you a very powerful argument model that will give you everything you need in order to deal with being caught in an argument, or if you wanted to create an argument, like we talked about argument as product in lecture 2. About making something like a podcast or a blog post. This will help you create the most effective argument if you're thinking about product that you could come up with. Also, it'll help you kind of find different handholds for if you're trapped in an argument. You know, being caught in an argument, we talked about in the last one, is one that you don't have to put up with if you don't want to, but you might lose the opportunity for full personhood. And I want you to think about an argument as facing a climbing wall, like a rock wall. Have you ever seen anybody do free climbing on a rock wall? It's impressive, right? I watch a lot of YouTube videos of these free climbers and people. I'm like, how do they do that? They manage to take their hand or their foot and put it in places where I wouldn't think there's any leverage or any place to get a handhold or to get stability. Well, argument is a lot like that rock wall. And what this argument model does, or what argument modeling does, is it shows us places to get a grip, to find a place to climb, to elevate ourselves, and to move up and possibly get on top of the argumentative situation. So that's the metaphor I want you to think about. Is I'm going to help you look at that rock wall face where you don't think there's anywhere where you could put your hand or pull yourself up, and give you some places to do that. So the model I'm going to teach you today is the most popular argument model in the world, and it's called the Toulmin Model of Argumentation. Stephen Toulmin was trained as a philosopher at Cambridge University and studied with some of the best. And when he wrote Uses of Argument in 1958, it had a huge impact. It was a huge book. I'm underselling it. It was a bombshell. It was explosive, incendiary. In fact, many people in philosophy thought it was a terrible book. They didn't think it was philosophy at all. Certainly not something someone who was a Cambridge-educated philosopher should write. It was almost dismissed. But across the pond, rhetoricians like myself and other scholars trained in the art of rhetoric like me thought it was a wonderful contribution to modeling arguments because it showed people how to make something of bad argumentative situations, or how to make something of their own ideas in an argumentative form. So let's take a look at it without any further historical explanation from me at the Toulmin model and how it works. Now, looking at the Toulmin model here, I drew this. Don't you think I'm incredibly talented? There's a lot of names here. These are the names that Toulmin uses in the book if you wanted to go and read it yourself. Data answers the question, what do you have to go on? What's the information that leads you to the claim? Usually that's not where we start in the argument. We usually start with the claim, which is what we would call the argument, the statement that the person believes in, or the statement that they want you to agree with, whatever we call that argument, the claim, the thing they want you to believe. Serena Williams is the best tennis player of all time. Hot dogs are the healthiest thing you could eat. Parrots are a better pet than dogs, whatever it might be. But then you'd say, well, how do you figure? What do you have to go on? Well, this is the information. This would be what we might call evidence or proof or information. The data, the research. What do we have to go on? What makes us think that claim is true? The data will lead to the claim, but in the middle, you see that arrow is supported, that pathway is supported by something called the warrant. And the warrant is the reasoning process that holds the data to the claim. It can come from many different places, and Toulmin goes into great detail here about where it could come from. It could come from sign, it could come from assumption, it can come from what fits, it can come from human experience. It doesn't really matter. There's not a number of wrong warrants. The important thing Toulmin's trying to tell us is that people will supply this connective glue from somewhere. The warrant is then supported by the backing, the historical evidence or the historical incidents or the things we know that make that kind of reasoning legitimate. The backing is the thing that makes the warrant work. The warrant is what sticks the data to the claim. Everybody with me so far? The claim then can be modified as well by two factors that make us think about intensity of how much they want us to understand that claim. The rebuttal are the conditions under which the claim would not be true. So this is the arguer backing out of things they don't want to defend. That would be, so in the example of Serena Williams is the best tennis player, unless Naomi Osaka overcomes her anxiety and has a better record over the next 10 years than Williams did. Or unless Serena Williams is beaten by so-and-so at Wimbledon or at the US Open. Unless you count the tennis playing of so-and-so and so-and-so. So these would be all conditions under which the person arguing says they would be happy to concede. They're trying to determine the scope and the scale of the argument. That's what they're doing with rebuttal. And the qualifier is the modification on how intensely they want you to take that claim. So on the one of defunding the police is a bad idea, you might say, well, defunding the police totally is a bad idea. Completely defunding the police is a bad idea. Removing all funding from the police. So that shows you the qualifier. Or defunding the police in the areas of weaponry and drug enforcement is a bad idea. So you see, it kind of narrows the claim that the person is willing to defend. That's what the qualifier does. I have never been beaten on a price. I have never been knowingly beaten on a price. There's the qualifiers in the knowingly, right? So let's look at a quick example to show you how to work this model. This can be something you can use to build your arguments. All these parts are necessary. All these parts are great parts of building an argument, and all of them help you have a better job of convincing your audience. Think about what it is that connects your data to your claim, and if you have knowledge of that, you can maybe talk about that as you write your argument or as you make your podcast for your audience. You can put it out there a little bit in more clarity for them. Okay, let's look at a quick example. You should vote for candidate A in the upcoming election. They are obviously the person who understands the issues best and will actually stand up for us. Now, this might be something you'd hear at work or from a friend of yours, and this is being kind of thrust into an argument. This is having an argument. You might not have invited this exchange, but here's someone trying to argue with you. Now, how can you use the Toulmin model to engage this person to make a meaningful exchange? Here's what I came up with. The Toulmin model is a great place to answer and come up with questions. You can push on any part of this person's statement that you want. If you want to push on the data, you might say, well, you didn't really provide a lot of information there. What makes you think they would represent us well? How do you know they're on our side? And why is our representation bad now? What's the information that you're basing this claim on? If you wanted to go to rebuttal, you could say, well, what if it was shown that they took money from special interest groups? What if it was shown that they really do support cutting public services? What if they're anti-union? Are they really on our side? And these would be rebuttal kind of questions to kind of prod your interlocutor to see how far they're willing to take their claim and what they're really defending here. That can make the argument more productive because you might find that the timbre of it decreases. You might find an entry point where both of you could have a very productive argument and both become somewhat enlightened about what you believe and what's missing from your belief that could be shored up later on. Qualifier questions include, how will they represent us better? And are there exceptions to their understanding? The backing is, how does this reasoning work in other cases? Has this happened before? And the warrant always answers the question, well, how do you figure? How do you go from the fact that they went to a state college that they are on our side? That doesn't really figure for me. Oh, well, they didn't go to a private school. They didn't go to Yale or Harvard or some elite school. Oh, so is it true that under all conditions, people who went from elite schools don't understand regular people's problems? Can you provide me some information on that? And this is how you engage argument meaningfully. You see that I'm not attacking their proposition at all. I'm not calling them wrong, and I'm not calling them dumb or stupid or ill-informed. What I'm doing is asking questions to get a more robust picture of what they believe so that I can engage it for my benefit and for theirs. Just like in the last lecture, Douglas Enninger's idea that argumentation is freedom and responsibility. I give them the freedom to respond, and I take the freedom to question, and I have the responsibility of pushing on their argument in order to convey full personhood on them by saying your mind is equal to my mind, and I'm really interested in how you come to this conclusion. That's the philosophy, a meaningful argument, and this is how to use the Toulmin model to advance meaningful argument.